there's a lot of structurally things wrong that have been done for decades and from both sides of the aisle. And as much as I think Trump and some people who are behind him have pretty well average good intentions to try to fix these things, some of these things are beyond fixing.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for November 11th through November 18th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature backdated 1-ounce silver Austrian Philharmonics at just $3.09 over spot per ounce. We also feature the limited edition 2024 1-ounce gold UK Lion and Eagle coin at just $99 over spot per ounce. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Peter Grandich from Peter Grandich and Company. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's truly always a pleasure to speak with you, Elijah.
Well, same to you here. Our viewers always appreciate our conversations. I did want to ask you, I guess starting off, we have a good amount of topics to cover today, but I know, last time and a few times before we were talking about the election and how, President Kamala Harris would have given you shivers, and we're past that now. I'm glad we came out the other side without her being president. So now we will have Trump as the 47th president. Your perspective on that?
Well, the only people unhappy are the ones that wanted to see 5,000 gold within a year, because that would have been clearly, but you would have had to use it in a world that might have just gone totally nuts. So the Trump victory, the way I like to describe it to people, nothing in the long-term past the year outlook that I've had has changed. If she had won, my feeling was she would greatly accelerate us to that. Trump will at least slow it down, or maybe even get it to grudgingly maybe stop where it is. I don't think he's going to be able to reverse a lot of the stuff that has transpired, as much as that's what some people, I call it, view it as the second coming. I looked in the Bible, I didn't see Trump's picture, but according to some, we are going through the second coming. But needless to say, it was very important for us, especially people of faith, because I think he'll do everything that this past administration didn't do for not only freedom of speech, but freedom to practice religion, and not just one certain religion from the Middle East, but a religion that was founded in this country several hundred years ago, and still most people, the majority of people, still want to practice.
Now, we've talked before about the many crises that we're facing right now. Two of them are immigration and also political chaos that you've talked about. So I think those are especially kind of front and center right now, since we have the answer to the election. It came early Wednesday morning, the day after the election. So it seems to be the fears of all this chaos or social unrest that didn't seem to materialize there. And then immigration, maybe it looks like that is going to be gotten under control here. Your perspective and an update on those, specifically those two crises that we've been seeing.
Sure. So my top five were and still are, although one is less than, and I'll share that in a moment, was the number one still remains the debt. We just crossed. It's still hard for me to say that we have $36 trillion in debt. When I started in the business, we never even used the word trillion. We didn't even know what a trillion really amounted to. But the second still remains the retirement and aging crisis. The third was the immigration invasion, and I think Trump will do a lot to stymie that. I don't think it should get worse during his time, and there could be somewhat of a reversal on that. But there's still a huge cost associated with it. The fourth still is the BRIC. This is just the quiet period now. They accomplished a lot what they wanted for 2024. And by spring, we'll start to hear what they plan on going forward, and for 2025. So I think that remains. But the political paralysis is still there. I mean, the hatred, there is not, there's no middle ground to the side that can't stand Trump. There's nothing, you can't say or do anything. They lie outright. They just make up stuff. And there has been a handful of people that have, I don't know if you want to call it gave an olive branch, but maybe they won't be as bad. But I think, that, as you know, and this is hard for a lot of people, I wrote about it this weekend again. I think this comes from an evil that is spiritually led, and these people have embraced it and their souls have been taken over by it. So I suspect after this honeymoon period, and by the way, between Thanksgiving and New Year's, no matter who is president or who's about to be president, Wall Street at least, and people in general in investing, go into what I call the no bah humbug period. Meaning I don't want to hear anything negative. I don't want to hear anything bad. I want to, for 1 month at least of the year, say hello to my fellow Americans, not argue with everybody. I'll worry about that in the new year. So you usually don't get a lot of big concerns expressed during that period. And I think that'll last through his inauguration. But soon after that, he will have to hit the ground running, Elijah, because he doesn't have 4 years. He only really has 2. And the reason I say that is we have congressional elections again 2 years from now. They almost always flip a little from what they did beforehand. And we have a lot of Senate seats that are going to be up, and more Republican-held Senate seats will be up. And those guys, if he doesn't hit the ground running and he starts to have issues, they may not stand behind him as much because they'll worry about their own reelection. But I certainly think there's a period of time now that we can say at least one of those top 5 has been put in check. I really think he is going to go full blast with the immigration. Hey, look, even up to the north of the border where it's just horrific what's happened there, Canada's suffering much more from their immigration invasion. Even their so-called leader right now has said that he's going to put a freeze on immigration. Too little, too late. But I think it's going to turn. It's turning in Europe. People are realizing you just can't have this overwhelming number of people coming in. And then the cost to those that are already here is just astronomical.
And how this all plays into what is happening in the markets, obviously, it's been very positive for the stock market. We've seen a downturn in gold, which actually you did call. I did want to maybe get into the precious metals, and we can talk about the other markets as well. But first, with precious metals, what is your take on how gold and silver have reacted to the election?
Yeah, so right at the height of the BRIC meeting, I decided that, I've been long gold since 1300, that we were going to have a sharp but fairly swift and not long-lasting correction. And I used it to take some profits. Thankfully, last Friday, I expressed that I thought the bulk of the correction was over and that, we can go back up. But what I do want to point out to people, we went up 40% in gold in a year from the beginning of the year to the height. This is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just a high-flying speculation. They can call it whatever they want. They claim it's going to be a reserve currency and all. Gold is a monetary force. It doesn't normally, nor is it really good for it to go up 40, 50% every year like that. So it was quite healthy. And for anyone like me who still believes we're going to be north of 3,000 before it's all said and done, and could be possibly a lot more than that, we needed this correction. It was basically a semi-parabolic move up. And quite frankly, the two things that were leading it up, the BRICS, happened. So, this buy the rumor, sell the news. And also the central bank buy-in eased a little, not to where it's changed, of course. And then, of course, the Trump win initially, people view was even more negative because the dollar rallied. He's going to be a Bitcoiner. He's not going to be a gold supporter. But gold, again, as you and I speak today, up nicely. I think it's up also because can I just stop and tell you the complacency in my 40 plus years, both by professionals as well as individual investors, is off the charts compared to the fundamentals out there. When today, we're probably the closest to a nuclear crisis since the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 60s with Kennedy. And you would never know that if you were listening or the talking heads on Wall Street or the average investors. But this is a real big concern. And look, you don't want to root for it, your gold, because it's going to wipe out even if you own gold. But it's really alarming that people have pushed something like that aside at a time when really those type of things should be even less handled by this current administration, because you're a lame duck, and basically put any of those decisions. Listen, if we haven't allowed Ukraine to shoot these missiles by now, and it's November 19th, what's 2 more months? Let the new presidency come in and let them handle it, so to speak. And some are arguing, I think it's a good argument, that this is a way of creating more problems for Trump than trying to help things get better.
It is concerning. It seems like for the last couple of years, we've been on the edge of World War III. Now, do you think that Trump can, I guess, get things under control? He didn't start a major war during his first presidency. I think that's the hope of a lot of people, that he'll bring peace. But do you see that being very likely?
He's the least of the warmongers that I've seen as president since I've been an adult. There's no question that even the overtures out of Putin was that, he's prepared to talk to Trump, but he's prepared. And of course, the other side, because he's in his pocket and all that. No, the man has not wanted to go and be the world's policeman. Even when his famous meeting with the NATO leader, when he said to him, we're paying 4 or 5 times more to protect you, and at the same time, you want us to pay to protect you from Russia, and you're buying all their gas. How does that make any sense at all? So I think we have a much better chance with Trump in the White House not to have World War III than we do with a man who just continues now. When you watch him, I don't even know if he has the capabilities to understand what his generals and all could be saying to him right now. And the other person is just what we all saw what she lacked. So it's really concerning between now and January 20th.
Yeah, I think this period is concerning in that respect. I did want to also ask about the stock market, right? As you mentioned, it's funny in some respect that there's all these risks and all these bad things happening in the world, but the stock market's just at all-time highs, and we saw that huge bump when Trump, was announced that he was going to be the next president. We saw the stock market rally. I think the Dow was up over 1,000 points, maybe close to 1,500. So why do you think is this real and sustainable in the markets, or do you anticipate that they're kind of topping out here?
Well, first of all, we've given a good part of that back now. Between last week and today, a good part of it. We're also seeing a lot of internals, I think, breaking down as well. I think the market has been up, and like I said, it gets a benefit from Thanksgiving to New Year's, that people kind of look at the cup half full no matter what until the New Year, and then of course they go back to being themselves. There's 2 things I think that have kept it going. One is all the excitement in the Bitcoin. Now everybody's excited. Bitcoin's 92,000. Had peaked at 70 something. It's not a huge move given where it was just a couple of years ago, but everybody and his mother says it's the next best thing. There's hard to find anything negative about it. I keep saying it won't peak until they announce it cures cancer. Then, of course, we'll know that we've reached the ultimate peak. But I think the thing to be concerned about, whether you're bull or a bear, is what happens with interest rates here, especially coming into another period where the Fed is expected to cut interest rates again. 10-year Treasury bond has actually increased almost by a full point from before the first cut in interest rates. And it's up in an area which I keep targeting, and we got right up to it again, the 450 yield area. And if we get much above that, I do think it's going to cause a huge problem no matter what period of time of the year is for the stock market. For one, for those that still treat stocks as stocks and bonds and not one big casino, there is some valuation models now that suggest for the first time in a couple of decades, bonds are actually getting more attractive than stocks, comparing one to the other. I also think that we're going to continue to see Trump, no matter what other things he may do well, be as big as a spender, if not more, and increase the debt up tremendously. And I think that's concerning, that the Stanley Druckenmillers, the Paul Tudor Jones, and some of the smartest people people who I'd give my money to tomorrow if they were managed for me. And that is, they are going negative on the bond market. They're becoming a word that I haven't heard since I first entered the business in the early 80s, bond vigilantes. And there's a great concern about the talk that's been around for decades in the gold market, but it's finally come to the bond market. And that is the ability for this country to pay off its interest. We're heading to 50 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office says we're going there in less than 10 years. A 5% interest rate, 2.5 trillion in interest expense. Best year we ever had was 2022 in revenue. It's a little about right on the 5 trillion mark. We can't sustain the government as we know it, no matter how many cuts and excess waste that they get rid of, which I think is going to be a challenge for them, by the way. But nevertheless, we won't be able to pay half of our income to interest and still have a government that we've grown accustomed to and all. So I think the stock market pretty well was in a mini melt up right up through the election and for a few days, but it's given most of it back. And like I said, if it wasn't for the seasonality of having positive, I'd even look to short it. But I just know that I too will not be bah humbug until after the 1st of January.
One of the things you mentioned was interest rates in the Federal Reserve. And I think a funny thing that we've seen is as the Fed has cut rates, we've seen bond yields rise and mortgage rates rise. So it's having the opposite. We're not seeing the effect that the Fed seems to want here. So where do you see that going? It seems like maybe these yields will continue to rise and put pressure on the stock market. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, they will. But where it's more pressure is in the average day American. First of all, we just learned today that 40% of car loans in existence are underwater, which simply means that people owe more on the car than the car is worth. So those aren't going to be any new car purchases anytime soon. That's the reason, because someone went out as far as 8 years in car loans. The second is we've seen it tremendously hurting continuously in the real estate market and in homes. Mortgages have popped back up. It's becoming increasingly, if not all-time difficult for new buyers to buy. And we're also seeing that, and let's not forget, we still have all these banks who have bought all those papers, the credit paper and bonds and stuff at the lows of interest rates, and they still have all these unrealized losses on their books. And then, of course, it impacts the working class person. Elijah, the bottom 50% of wage earners, or 1 out of 2 of Americans, half of them, or 25% of all workers, are using credit cards to just pay necessities. Gas, rent, food. That credit card is the biggest monkey in the back. It's worse than borrowing money from the mob, because once you start making just those minimum payments, you never get out. And these are all serious issues, and they'll come to bear sooner than most people think. Maybe not in the next few weeks, because it's not something people will focus on. But there's a lot of structurally things wrong that have been done for decades and from both sides of the aisle. And as much as I think Trump and some people who are behind him have pretty well average good intentions to try to fix these things, some of these things are beyond fixing. And I think the realization that may not come to the latter part of next year when they see that a lot of those things don't get done. And it's sad to say, but it's your business, that actually still bodes well for the metals. That's why I don't have any real concerns about anything structurally wrong with the gold market. I know the BRICS are going to move more forward. I know that central banks recognize the change is coming, and that's why they've accumulated all this gold. And so the gold market is a much safer place for fears of loss of large principal. It may not make as much as some people predicted and all, but I don't think it has a 40 or 50% downside. I do think if some things go wrong, the stock market could have that. And I think that's the other supporting mechanism now for gold. And against bonds, people are feeling gold is a place for safety of principle, something that you've spoken about, and I'm sure your dad was speaking about when you were a little boy. And it's true, and it's finally come to bear. The things that were spoken about for 10 or 20 years that people kept hearing, maybe to the point they were nauseous. But now those things are playing out right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, if we look at the big picture here, obviously, Trump won, and there's a lot of positive things that can happen here. But it sounds like you're still concerned about the economy, and I think a lot of us can maybe put a lot of faith in politics, right? I think I'm very hopeful for a lot of the things, maybe RFK helping in the medical field, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy cutting off some of the fat in government, right? But at the end of the day, it's important not to put our faith in politics, but put our faith in God. So did you want to kind of wrap up by explaining your view on that?
Yes, I actually wrote about it this weekend to my clients. I wrote what I said was the best advice I will ever give. And I try to basically paint it out, and it's available. If people want to see it. It's enough. It's on my blog. It's on my X page. And I really just spoke about it. Again, most people don't want to hear this, even if they understand what I'm talking about. And that is that this battle that we're having is not a human against human. It's an evil spirit that is far more powerful than anything that a human nature can muster. And once certain people embrace that negative evil spirit, it's very challenging to overcome it. And that's why I think, as good-hearted as some people are with these attentions that you just spoke about, they're up against really the biggest negative force that's known in the universe. Fortunately for us and those who accept Christ as their Lord and Savior and recognize the victory had been won already at the cross, but the battle still continues because the sum total of the battle is not known, who ends up where. And that's also what I pointed out in our writing and all. And I think that's what I am going to count on more than, it's great if Trump, and like you said, gets these things done. But even if he doesn't, or something, God forbid, happens and things get worse and not better, my focus will be on what I'm taught in the good book, a book that for a couple thousand years has outlasted every other book. It's a manual for life for me. And I encourage people, even if they just look at it as an historical book, look at some of the things it's been at, right? It's big. It talks more about matters of money than it does even about what you think would be the two end issues, heaven or hell. And what's real interesting about that, there isn't a positive verse about debt. In fact, the Bible's full of warnings about the troubles of debt and what you will get into if you become a debtor. We're also taught, if we're the creditor, that we're supposed to help some of those that are in the debt. And also, to answer your question, and I know you and I walk in that same group, it's tough for a lot of people to hear this, especially when it's tied to the financial world. If I may tell you, I don't know if I ever had a chance to tell you, when I decided to open up Trinity, which was the sports management company for Christian athletes, and I went to the broker-dealer I was working for in 2000, the guy told me, you can put a rock on the door, you can put a bull or a bear, but you're not putting God's picture on the door. You don't mix religion and politics, religion and finance. And basically, if you look around the financial service industry, that's true. What you and I speak about, you will not find on many other mediums at all. But thankfully, you give me the opportunity to do that, and you're open to it and all. And, there's a certain percentage of people that appreciate that. But there's also certain people that don't want to hear it, or actually think worse, that we're only saying it to profit from it. But that's you and I have a calling. Believe it or not, as much as you are here to talk about gold, we're probably doing more speaking about this for any one person than any one person might have benefited from our gold or stock advice. And that's the beauty and the gift that you and I have been blessed with, Elijah.
We really appreciate your time as always, and your ability to speak on these subjects as well. If our viewers are interested in learning more, they can go to petergrandich.com. And also, I know you're very active on Twitter, or x.com. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. X is where I'm most active on, but there is a blog at petergrandich.com. There is a YouTube channel as well. And, I tell everybody I'm well down the stretch in my business career and life itself, but I am trying to do as much as I can. And the X page is the easiest and simplest way to communicate right now.
Fantastic. Peter, once again, thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
God bless you, Elijah.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for November 11th through November 18th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature backdated 1-ounce silver Austrian Philharmonics at just $3.09 over spot per ounce. We also feature the limited edition 2024 1-ounce gold UK Lion and Eagle coin at just $99 over spot per ounce. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.